Hello, and thank you for joining us on Vermont Film Essentials. My name is David Metzger,
I'm Devon.
and today we are going to be talking about William Friedkin's The French Connection, which, when I think about, we're both students of 70s cinema. We both love it. It influenced us a lot. And when I think about 70s films, obviously there's the great character studies like Five Easy Pieces,
Right.
Cuckoo's Nest, all that stuff. But then there's also these great moments where a director gets handed a script like this, which is like, on paper is just a basic cops and robbers film. It's a crime film.
Right.
It gives you all the things that the genre needs. But then it's just the vision of the director to say, like, I know exactly how I'm going to shoot this. It's not going to be like anything else that anyone's ever done. And it's going to be one of the most influential films of all time.
I mean, it almost feels like there has to be something stylish about the screenplay, because if you look at Ernest Tidyman, I don't know how you pronounce the last name, but his other credits are Shaft. He also wrote the novel that Shaft is based on, two other Shaft movies, Shaft's Big Score and Shaft in Africa, and High Plains Drifter. It's like, man, talk about a distinct kind of like, wow, that's a pretty impressive 70s list.
Right.
You know?
Right.
He had his run, and I feel like that definitely had to play. I mean, it's stylishly written. There are so many memorable lines.
And there's such an ear for, and I got to assume that it's, Friedkin coming from a documentary film world. Like, that's how he got his big break, by making this documentary about a prisoner. And, him looking at it and saying, like, no, I want to show the real gritty underbelly of what a cop goes through.
He was apparently influenced by the film Z.
Yep.
And so then he wanted to take a more documentary style approach, which I think worked incredibly well for the film.
It's one of those things where you look at it now and it's like, obviously Steven Soderbergh has said that when he made Traffic, he's like, we watched this, we watched Z, we watched Battle of Algiers, and every, all like Law and Order was shot the way it was shot because of this. And
you got to give kudos to an editor in that standpoint. I mean, Jerry Greenberg on this, not only Apocalypse Now, but a laundry list of films. And it's like that, and all the films you mentioned rely on great editing in order to bring about that sort of realistic depiction.
And it is one of the best edited films ever.
Absolutely. The car chase alone, but there are also a number of foot chases that are very well done.
But thinking about the way he shot, because there's different angles, and there's different ways the scene could have gone. Like, they're improvising and just making stuff up in some scenes. I mean, you got to think of like as an editor looking at that and being like,
they're shooting on location. I mean, reading the number of different neighborhoods they shot in, it's astounding. It's like 12. It's like over 12. It's incredible, and that's where you got to develop a lot of inspiration if you're Friedkin and the cinematographer, because you're really able to use your environment and maybe use something that you didn't necessarily know you were going to use, because you're able to play around a little bit and use this, really bring this city to life. Do
you know who his first choice was for Popeye Will?
Yeah, well, he wanted Paul Newman, but then there was Jackie Gleason, Peter Boyle, and then a New York columnist that had no acting experience.
Right.
Yeah. And then also a couple like Steve McQueen, Charles Bronson. He was actually vehemently opposed to the idea of Hackman, apparently.
Right.
At first.
Right.
Yeah.
Until, he looked at Bonnie and Clyde?
I don't know.
Either that or he met him. But I mean, the Jackie Gleason thing was the one that was just like, wow, really?
I know,
you
really.
had a completely different...
Exactly. And apparently they didn't use him because he had just had a flop.
Right.
And then Boyle was opposed to the violent themes in the film, and they couldn't afford Newman or McQueen.
And the journalist, he was hired.
Yeah, he was actually the closest to getting it. It was like, okay. And the crazy thing is how different of a film this would be without the intensity of one Gene Hackman. it's one of the top, perhaps it's one of the top 10 American performances of all time. I think you could make a case, because there is a sense of desperation in his. First of all, it's like the character is written so well, but the way he applies this sense of complete, out of control, untethered, desperate circumstances that he finds himself in. I realized, watching the intensity of this chase scene, how he's actually, because of how desperate he is, able to have access to a certain fortitude that someone with less to lose would not have had access to.
Right.
To be able to, right? And I realized it's actually like very much like Moby Dick, to be honest. There's a monomania to him that is very Captain Ahab, and it's at the expense of everyone around him. I mean, he already killed a cop. Right. He takes out another one in his wake, and what does he say when Scheider says, you killed him? And he says, I know he's around here somewhere. Right. He doesn't even hear him. Right. And it's the exact same way that Ahab is just, he wants that whale, and it doesn't matter if they all die getting it.
Right. And there's also with Hackman and I think this comes from growing up and watching his performance, like, there's Superman, there was Hoosiers. There's such a likability to him and an instant charisma to him that is not, like, he's not showing off
real.
in any way. He's
like
he's
so
the dude that
natural.
lives next door.
Right.
Right? And
yeah. I mean, his naturalness could be compared to Nicholson in its level of just doesn't seem like acting.
Right. Right. And much like not to put anything against Nicholson, but it's it's less showy in a way of like he's just being, like you don't see the
It's
acting.
more workman-esque.
Right.
Like it's like, yeah.
Right. I'm just showing up and I'm doing the job and just, this is the thing that I'm doing.
He admitted that when he found the pork pie hat, that's what truly made the wheel turn for him, and you can tell in the way he uses it. I mean, he'll hold it in his hand. It's really like a prop. And when they deliver the paperwork after that first initial bust, the way he puts the paper, he puts his hat on as he puts the paperwork. I mean, it's an extension of him.
Right. There's a great story that Friedkin tells about him that he didn't like acting. Or at least he came across as someone who didn't like acting.
Right.
He also came across as someone who didn't like authority. So as a director, he needed to direct them and to get him to these places, and he would always kind of shut him away or do the opposite of what he said. He doesn't seem to
tolerate BS. Right. Which can be an asset or it can be a detriment sometimes, I think, in his career. Right. If you look at later things with Wes Anderson and stuff.
Absolutely. Yeah. But in Friedkin talking to Hackman, he found out that he grew up with a father who was very domineering, and he hated his father. So Friedkin's like, well, I became his father to him to drive this anger out of him, because in a lot of the scenes, especially like the scenes when he's talking to the perp and he's like, you pick your feet in Poughkeepsie,
right.
Like that whole thing,
right?
Like he didn't have the intensity. Like there's a moment in there where he's like, come on, talk to me, and you're just like, Jesus.
You telling me that about him and his father just made me view. Is it I Never Sang for My Father with Melvin Douglas?
Yes.
Yeah, it made. I mean, wow! Like that adds a whole new way to look at that film. And it might have been why he took it, just at the challenge of dealing with that.
But this film and The Conversation, I think, are
the Conversation to me is Coppola's best film.
Absolutely.
So the if the pork pie hat is Hackman's prop, the umbrella is Fernando Rey's prop.
Yes.
And there's a great story about. Did you read about how? Friedkin had seen Belle de Jour, and he saw an actor that I think Francisco Rabal that he was like, he couldn't remember the guy's name, And so he told his casting director, he's like, I know he's Spanish, he was in a Buñuel film. So his casting director thinks it's Fernando, or reaches out to Fernando Rey, because he was in 2 other Buñuel films. So turns out that Rabal can't speak French or English, so Rey becomes the logical choice, and he's now the part. So it's just this weird kind of serendipitous set of circumstances that led to the perfect person being cast in that role. I mean, it's the way he, and just the prop itself, like the umbrella. So there's like this great setup payoff where Hackman initially loses him during a chase, and then he only notices him going down the subway station stairs because of the umbrella, and then it ends up becoming, so we notice it because we see it through his eyes. Right. So then it becomes this thing that eventually he uses to get the subway doors open so that he can go back in and lose him for the final time. So it's like this great, it really becomes this great like piece in the film. I mean, it's amazing. It's like his magic wand, because guess what? Spoiler alert, the bad guy wins. And you know,
the ending of
the chess game.
The ending of this film is one of. There was a couple moments in my life in watching films of the '70s and like experience an ending like this, an ending like The Conversation, and then to an even greater degree the ending of Easy Rider, where it gave me like this haunted, like scared, uneasy feeling, but it also like kind of charged me as like, really, you can end a film like that? You can have your hero lose him, but shoot his own man, and not even care.
I mean, Hackman even gave Hackman. Even the way Fernando Rey completed that little cat and mouse chase with the gloved hand wave, Hackman even gives that back to him. And you think that the good guys won. And you're like, yes, all is right. Even though Hackman's debatable, there's a lot of moral ambiguity with Hackman's character. Right. But it's like, wow, to just like make you feel just, it's tragic, man.
And getting to the heart of the moral ambiguity is, you know, Friedkin did a lot of ride-alongs with actual police officers and stole a lot of stuff that he ended up putting into the movie. But he was like, you know, at the heart of this movie is this. It's a man that's just completely going off of his own adrenaline, and that adrenaline is what's driving him, and it can go both ways. Like, it's not, you know, all the things that he does that is, you know, if you just take it a little bit to a degree, or it has another outcome, he's heroic.
I mean, it's illustrated beautifully in moments like when there's a great scene when he's trying to convince the captain to let him, you know, get everything he needs, and it's like a great line. He says, I wouldn't be interrupting your coffee break if this was a nickel and dime or whatever, or infringing upon your coffee break. Right. And then he says, what is it? So basically there's a moment where the captain defends him to the guy who doesn't like Popeye, and he basically is kind of saying, you know, even though, so we get that hint of his prior, you know, mishap, right? And then it's like, he's basically defending him, saying his heart's in the right place, but he's just flawed, but he's a good cop, right? It immediately jump cuts to him like stone cold drunk in a dive bar at what looks like the crack of dawn, and he like, the barkeep just let him sleep there because it's obviously like his like haunt, right? Right. And then he immediately like picks up the bicyclist girl, you know, and it's like, whatever, that's cool. It's like he's doing his thing, but then he's like handcuffed to the bed. It's just like, seems like it's just a beautiful contrast with this perception that we are. It's like, okay, and then it's immediately contrasted, you know? Just great character work as far as telling a story and really framing the different aspects of a character.
Right. Owen Roizman, cinematographer.
Great.
You know, this, The Exorcist, and then Network.
Oh yeah, and you know, talk about gritty films. He shot Taking of Pelham 1, 2, 3, which is one of the grittiest New York City films ever, and also falls into line with the '70s films we were talking about. You know, I think having those two under your belt is pretty impressive.
And then there's just so many, the car chase, all the different lens choices that he uses, and knowing that, you know, yes, they're going fast,
right,
but the lens that he has on that car enhances it.
Right. And some of the stunt drivers were just supposed to narrowly miss him, and there were accidental collisions that they left in the film. I mean, and then I find out that Friedkin, the whole chase scene was edited while Santana's Black Magic Woman was playing, and that there was like this like preordained rhythm to it that without the music that you can just like so cool. And actually, I thought of that part. So he almost hits the woman and her child, and he hits a garbage can instead, and trash goes flying. That scene in Speed had to have been influenced by that. When he hits the baby carriage and the cans go flying, right? It's like almost the same shot. It really seems like an homage, you know.
Well, if you're going to do a chase, it's like
exactly.
You only look at two.
What do you study at? So you're a big Howard Hawks guy, right?
Yep.
Did you read the story?
Yeah.
What do you think of my films? They're lousy.
Make a chase. Make it the best you can make it.
And what did he do? He really did. And because everything, you know, we talk about set pieces like last Mission Impossible had some pretty impressive ones, and it's like this is like the real, just like mother of all set pieces in an action film. It's like one of them. Like it's like the way the film builds towards it. Everything's just building towards this one moment. It truly encapsulates the whole film. I mean,
do you know there was a David O. Russell and his editor that he's worked with for, you know, the Silver Linings Playbook and American Hustle. He had a theory where it's like when you're editing a movie, if a movie has, if the structure is set, then at the 55 to 60 minute mark, something should happen that pulls the audience into the film deeper. And he said, you know, the most obvious example is this, because right at 56 minutes, that's when the car chase happens. And he said it's just like it's like that's the amount of time that the audience can sit and not be bored. So something has to be at that moment where the audience can't be bored. And it doesn't necessarily have to be a chase, but it should be something that...
That's awesome.
Yeah.
You know, something that let me know about Friedkin's understanding of symbolism and composition that he uses later in The Exorcist, but like here is like, so there's the moment before the sniper is about to, so there's this low shot of this kid on a tricycle, almost makes you think of The Shining, and then he turns a corner and he rings his bell, and then as soon as you hear the bell, Gene Hackman turns the corner, the shot rings out, kills the woman. So I really thought it was like this subliminal suggestion of innocence, like foretelling this impending evil that's about to invade the space, right? Like it's genius, because he's making us focus on the kid. It's not this wide shot where this happens to be happening. It's no, follow this, wait, what's happening here? It's like, I mean, it's like music.
Right.
And his understanding of it, it's too bad his career was so kind of up and down, or why he kind of, you know, I wish he could have been making like just like dynamite films later in his career, but it's like this and The Exorcist, I mean, two of the best.
Yeah. And for my money, I think The Exorcist succeeds even more where he starts his kind of style and his documentary-like fixation on everything.
I think his sense of composition expands.
Yeah, yeah.
Because in this, it's a little more like kind of free reign, mixture of styles, right? But with The Exorcist, he really hones in on what shot follows what shot, how everything works together in really, really nice concert.
And giving you, there's particular scenes where it has the looseness of this, but then you get moments where, no, this is just a tableau shot of Max von Sydow walking up to the house, and he's silhouetted by it's just beautiful.
I thought of Michael Mann at one point, because there's a scene where they're on a stakeout outside, like the really like apartment building, and there's this shot where like the street light is reflecting off the chrome like grill of their car, and it reminded me of the opening shot to Thief. There's like this neat like light hitting metal, like New York City, or that's not New York City, that's in Chicago. But it's a similar kind of like feel.
Yep.
And I feel like I hadn't thought of that in regard to Mann.
Well, and I think this had to have been a film that he either influenced him a lot or he thought about it a lot, because it just seems to be up his alley of what he wants to do in terms of getting to, having like kind of like this journalistic approach to a crime story, and he would blow that up completely in Heat, where it's like really looking at the moral ambiguity of your police officer hero, matched with the bad guy who is.
You could extend that to Nolan too, because there's almost a moral ambiguity to the Joker in Dark Knight. Like he's more human than I think he's been allowed to be in any of the other film adaptations. Right? You really can like identify with him, and that makes it even more resonant when he goes off the hinges. Right? This is a person that this happened to. Right?
Right.
Yeah. But anyway, French Connection.
For as much as I love it's going to be a little tangent, but for as much as I love the handheld in your face style, I do think it's a little overused now, and I think everyone is kind of using the handheld as a way to kind of be more realistic.
It was used sparingly, it was used like strategically in this film, right? There's like low-angled shots that are like beautifully composed, and then there's, it's really like, it's not all just like cinema verite, right? I think that kind of just like, if it's not used strategically, it can be unbearable.
Absolutely. And I think
Paul Greengrass sometimes really toes the line with like, I'm getting a headache, or is this working? Because he'll do it in like sometimes like shots where Tony Scott, where people are just talking. It's like, do we really need this like frenetic kind of like camera work here? Like, it's just a room where people are talking. What, you trying to enhance suspense here with your camera? Like,
and I do think I think that is, with films like Battle of Algiers and Z and this, it's. I think a lot of people say like, well, I want it to have a very realistic documentary-like approach, and they just think like, oh, it's all handheld, and that's just the thing. And I even see like in particular scenes, like they'll be on a close-up of someone, and it's like the cameraman is actually like doing it on like it's not like a just that's the way they're holding it.
Yeah.
So I don't know. It's just a little tangent like where I think it's kind of overused, and I'm waiting for someone to use it in that right dynamic way again. Jean-Marc Vallée, I think, is a person that, like with Dallas Buyers Club and even his adaptation of Big Little Lies, where he's using it and he seems to be using it for a purpose, not just throwing it out there just to do it. But I do think it's one of the things is that with the guerrilla indie movement, it's like, well, that's the cheapest way is you just get out and do it and get it cheaply and quickly. But I don't know. I find myself being drawn more to a steady shot rather than, for the sake of time and for the sake of documentary realism, just throwing it on your shoulder. I think it's more distracting now. But here it's not. Because this is one of the first, big this was a big Hollywood movie. And for him to kind of, he was such a ballsy director in the way he was just like, he just had his vision and he committed to it. And that he's very similar to Francis Ford Coppola in that way, where it's like, I know what needs to be done, and I have all the answers.
You live and die by your kind of grandiosity,
Yeah.
Can either really help you out or leave you the only one on the island, you know. So,
and there's stories that I heard from this and stories that I heard from The Exorcist where it's like, he's not great,
right?
It's pretty questionable the things that he gets. But then you look at the final product and you're like, well, is that what it takes?
I wanted to touch on just the chemistry between Scheider and Hackman and how it's easy to underlook Scheider's performance because of just the intensity of Hackman's performance. But Scheider's character almost serves as like a conscience to him, and he values his partnership with him.
Right.
He really does.
Right.
And there's this scene where Hackman makes a racist comment, and Scheider says he could have been white, and then he says, "I don't trust anybody." And it was like he was listening to him. Like basically, Scheider's calling him out.
Right.
Like being, "Hey man, don't be like that."
Right.
He goes, "Well, I don't trust anybody."
Right.
Okay, you want me to be just a humanist? All right, yeah. I don't trust anybody. Not humanist, but you know what I mean? Like see things equally.
And you see, like I value the partnership, but clearly there's
they still
there's two
disagree
different
with each
points
other.
of view.
Right, and there's a great moment of their friendship and camaraderie in the scene at the nightclub.
Yeah.
Where he goes, well, "You want to play hide the salami with his old lady?" And then it's Hackman's response that sells it because he goes, "Yeah." Like, that's a real friendship.
Right.
Those are real, and that's great writing too. But it's execution of great writing.
And then there's the little moment where he's like, "Oh, drink this," and like just the way that
he's always
men
having to
are
bail him
with
out
together.
a little bit. So it's like any friendship, though. It's like Rio Bravo. We talk about Wayne and Martin.
Yep.
It's like, yeah, they're friends, and there is that camaraderie, but it gets pretty annoying after a while, where you're like, okay, let me help you out again.
And that is even, that's paid off in a very haunting way at the end of the film, because it's Scheider that's saying, like, you just killed him, and Hackman's going, and it's like,
well, that's the
I
ultimate.
can't follow you down that darkened hallway.
Exactly, and that's where it all comes to a head. Because before that, to Scheider, Hackman was the guy who killed a cop, but it was a gray area. Who knows what really happened? There's Hackman's side of the story. There's this side of the story. It's abstract, right?
Right.
So he knows the man who he's been partners with, but that's the real moment where he sees really who he is, who Hackman, who Popeye Doyle is, in that one act. I mean, you can't hide behind that act.
Right.
And the just monomaniacal nature of where he's not even hearing it. I mean, he's deaf to just, I mean, common decency. What most people would, you know what I mean? Not to say that there aren't going to be those types of situations in police work, right? But he definitely has become consumed by something that is not allowing him to really view it in a.
He's obsessed.
I mean, you can't. Yeah.
And it's great because Friedkin was a very much a great admirer of Hitchcock.
Oh, there's multiple Hitchcock moments I noticed in this. Yeah. Continue.
And that that level of kind of looking at someone who is obsessed is something that Hitchcock did time and time again.
There's a couple moments I noticed. One in which, Fernando Rey and Tony LaBianco are talking in front of the Capitol building.
Yep.
And you're not. They did this to get away from cops, right? So you're not really thinking that they're being watched. But then there's this, after they're done talking, there's a rack focus and an immediate push.
Yeah.
Quick push onto the guy that's watching them.
Yeah.
That's so Hitchcock.
Yeah.
And then there's also this the music was also pretty effective in this movie. And there's a moment where Hackman is tailing Fernando Rey, and he accidentally kind of walks right up to where he's coming out of the building, and there's this like jarring music that's timed on that moment, which Hitchcock was a wizard at.
Right.
Because understanding that you can control how someone feels when they experience that moment.
Right.
You know?
Because it's like a little stinger.
Right.
And
exactly.
And you have no, you're like him. You're as surprised and as caught off guard as him. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Oh, man. There's a lot in this film.
It really is tragic what happened to Friedkin, because he was, in that Coppola sense, like, just knew how to make a film, and knew who he was, knew his voice, and then something happened where it's like then just the work just kind of suffers, or it's not connecting in that same way. And I think it was probably Sorcerer that did that, because that was the one time where he's like, I put, this was my next big film, and I really wanted it to do well, and it didn't.
I've still never seen it, because I'd like to, just for posterity's sake, but I worship Wages of Fear so much that I really had no desire to see a William Friedkin remake of it. Like, I just like, how good could it be? Like,
it's good, but it's not that good.
Right.
Right.
When you're standing in the shadow of something that giant, it's like, should you even have attempted the endeavor?
It would be like someone wanting to remake Night of the Hunter. It's like, why?
Exactly. Or Touch of Evil,
right?
Or anything like that. That's why Gus Van Sant's remake of Psycho is so just laughable, in my opinion.
Even as you hear him talk about it now, where it's like, it's an experiment, but it's like, yeah, but why?
Do that for your friends.
Right.
Like, don't release that for public consumption,
right?
Because
there's no.
Sorry, like, so yes, you proved that you can shoot a film shot for shot, what someone else did, and it won't be the same as what that person did. Thank you. Okay. It was like a public service. Like,
now on to Elephant.
He proved it. Yeah, exactly. And that's the thing. I'm a fan of
a
lot of Van Sant's work. That was just a lesson for, like, don't try to remake something that's that good. Just, if you want to do what De Palma does, do it in the vein of, like, make films with that filter. If you want to do that, put it through that filter. But, yeah.
We'll talk about that more when we talk about Psycho.
Exactly. There's moments of humor too, real quick. With your introduction to Hackman, he's undercover as a Salvation Army Santa Claus.
Yep.
I mean, that's just great, man. It's like, it's so, especially coming after what is a very strong opening of this professional hit, right? And then, like, that's the next thing.
You know what else it is about there's no vanity to him, where he's gonna look like it's not like he's like a clean, like, he looks like a bum Santa, and and that when he gives chase to the person, like, he looks how he looks running in a Santa suit,
right?
And there's just no. I feel like there's no actor today that would do that for those reasons.
I mean, it spoke volumes that I could not imagine Paul Newman in that role. Like, Paul Newman, the work he did in HUD and The Hustler and all these films, right? Great actor, one of the best. But Hackman, man, for this specific role, Hackman had access to something inside him that really latched on to what was going on with this character. And, it's like a quote I read recently in a book talking about acting, where you really have to find the way that the character works with your own personality. And in that particular instance, it really just connected clearly.
And for someone like Paul Newman, like, he had to age before he could do that, before he could do The Verdict, where it shows, you know,
Right.
the rough side of his character.
Right.
And for him to wear that
Road to Perdition, I mean, he obviously has the potential for vulnerability and for all kinds of stuff, and it's just like, just something about the way Hackman handled this was very just, I mean, who knows if there was anyone who could have done what he did.
And he's like, he is similar to Nicholson in this way too, is that when you see him in Bonnie and Clyde, he's already fully formed. Like, he's already Gene Hackman. Like, Gene Hackman has always been Gene Hackman.
Right.
You know, there's a particular performance that you know you're going to get from him, and there's a particular look and a particular way he's going to articulate things. Right. And it's just it works. Like, you know, Hoosiers is such a, you know, you look at it now and you're like, well, you know, it's not the greatest movie in the world, and it's very manipulative in the way that it tells its story. But him at the center of that, like, lends a gravitas to that film. Well, him and Hopper.
It's very. I actually think it's very relevant today because Belichick is sort of like that. Look, who knows what happened when he benched? Is it Malcolm Butler in the Super Bowl? Mm-hmm. But a lot of people say that was the reason they lost, and he did it. Was it out of pride? Was it out of it? And it's like that sort of move of, you know what? No, our players are on the floor, mm-hmm. right? And it's so, and you know, it's like a lot of times it helps win that level of, like, but it also can, you know, mm-hmm. be incredibly hard to take,
right,
as a player in that organization, you know.
And that is what, when Hackman gets angry in a performance, like in Hoosiers when he's going crazy about a play or a call, mm-hmm. like in Crimson Tide when he is just fed up with having to explain to his CO why he's doing what he's doing.
Right. Him in Crimson Tide is a lot. It feels a lot like Nicholson in A Few Good Men.
Absolutely.
That level of just indignation, yep. Self-righteous indignation,
right,
backed by authority.
But even like with, like in A Few Good Men, you say you listen to Nicholson and you're like, I know you think you know why you did it, mm-hmm. but don't you understand why you're crazy, right? And with Crimson Tide, it's like, even if you don't agree with what he's doing and how he's doing it, mm-hmm. he's not crazy. He's just trying to, you know, this is his way of, like, you know, they got nukes and they're going to send it to
right.
us unless I do that.
Well,
like,
did you see Sully?
Yeah.
It's similar. It's kind of similar to that, because it's like he did what needed to be done, mm-hmm. and it could be construed as crazy. But mm-hmm. guess what? Maybe he's the only person who could have gotten them out of that situation.
Right.
You know,
right.
And is willing to not be scared and to access a level of just complete focus that allows them to make decisions that the average human would not be able to make, you know? Yeah. Oh, let's not leave out Unforgiven.
Oh, yeah.
Because there is a moment in Unforgiven that I count as one of my top 10 favorite moments an actor's ever shown me on screen, which is when is it Richard Harris that he's kicking the living crap out of?
Yep.
And there's a moment when he turns away and there's a complete look of fear, like an uncertainty, and it's only for a moment, and then it's gone, and then he's big bad. It's like, whoa! I couldn't believe it. I had to rewind it and show my friend. I was like, wait, did you see that? Look at that one moment. Look what's going on in his eyes.
Is that after he does it, like when he's turning to look at the townspeople?
Yes, but right before he turns, there's a moment where he's truly, you see his character. It's like, and you know, in this, his desperation is communicated through his eyes. For all his barking and all that, it's all just, he's masterfully created this character. Mm-hmm. This character doesn't feel comfortable. He's angry at the world for something. It's like, it's just, nothing will fit. He just can't, it's like this complete unease, and that's what causes him to be the way he is, you know? It's like,
and it ties into, you know, even if he gets this guy, there's going to be another guy.
What then? Exactly.
You know? There's going to be another person that he has to do, and it's like this endless quest of like, I'm never going to, because that's the, I mean, that is what it is at the heart of most police officers, right? It's like, I need to, we have to uphold this thing, and I need to get it to a spot where it's over.
Right.
But there's no over.
Right.
Right. and that's his uncomfortability. It's like, you know, I don't understand this world that I have to somehow try to control and try to manage, because it's absolutely unmanageable.
I mean, that's the thing. It's not just one of the best performances ever. It's one of the best, most well-written characters.
He deserved his Best Actor Oscar.
Yes, he very much did. And there's not so many of those where you absolutely are ensured of that. I mean, we could look at the list and see who else was up. I'm sure maybe there might be some people that are like, but I mean, it's just like, it's truly one of the greatest. Yeah.
I'm only sore at it for one thing only, is because...
What's yours? Because I only have one. Go.
That it came out the same year as Last Picture Show.
Oh, okay.
What's yours?
Mine is the unrealistic-looking blood squibs.
Yeah.
The paintball orange.
Well,
like it, and then, yeah. Go ahead.
That is, I think that is...
it's a product of the 70s.
Product of the 70s,
yes,
yeah.
Yes.
They just didn't get the mixture right.
Right. And the reason it doesn't even come into play for me to even talk about, even though we mentioned it, but is because there is so much painstaking attention to realism in this film, from the street hockey players in the background of a shot to everything is just, every shot is created with such utter realism.
So why didn't they see that the...
Well, no. So it helped me. It helped gloss over the fact that the blood didn't look real. Right. So it was just like, it was like this one thing in the film that was like, yeah, just that one part of the painting that it's like, who cares? Look at the rest of this. You know what I mean? It's like one little.
And then it has to be, because it's not the. It is very much a product of the. I mean, even like, you know,
De Palma. Some of the, I feel like there's some De Palma and certain '70s films that just. I think even Bullet has some pretty fake-looking blood, if I recall correctly.
Judge Roy Bean.
Dirty Harry movies.
It was just, you know, not to dissect it and study it for a long time, but it really was just, they just didn't get the mixture right.
Right.
Like, there's something about the way the film reacts to it and shows off the color red.
Right.
Where it's either just a vibrant red or it's, you know, subdued and a little bit more maroon. Right. But either one isn't necessarily right. I mean, it took Fincher to be like, well, actually, it's black.
Interesting.
And yeah, Hitchcock didn't have to worry about it because it was black and white.
Right. Exactly. Yeah. One of my favorite lines, they're at the nightclub. He says, trying to figure out who the guys at the table are. He says, he don't look the same without numbers across his chest. I mean, you know, there's just these great lines. So many quotables, you know.
And you have to, when you hear a line like that, it's like, wow, like, does someone actually sit down and write that, or is it overheard?
Right.
You know? And that's what kind of, that's just what adds to the level of authenticity.
What was in the book that he adapted the screenplay from, you know? Who knows what, yeah. You never know. And the two detectives that this was based on are in the film. Yeah. I can't like pinpoint, I wish I'd known before I watched it, because I would have been listening for their characters' names. But there is this great thing I read about there's that iconic moment when the sniper is getting shot in the back on the subway stairs. And I guess a bunch of the police officers that were on the set as advisors were like, whoa, that's murder. That's not self-defense. That's not what a police officer would do. And Friedkin was pretty adamant about, like, I think that's what Egan would have done. And he's here on set right now while we're filming this.
Right.
So I think I'm gonna like let the fact that he hasn't said anything about it, like, speak to me.
Right.
Right.
See, and that's the.
Because he's like, this film's about this guy,
right?
Not police officers in general. So it's actually brilliant that he's able to navigate that and be that comfortable with what he's doing.
And it's, you know, and we talked about this before. It's like, as a director, you know, how do you know what advice you should listen to and what not to listen to, and when to stick to your guns and when you're just being, you know, it's that very fine line,
right?
You know, because he could have said, like, oh, all right,
you're right.
Well, you guys would know.
Let's fix this. Let's do this differently.
Yeah. And then you don't have that moment, and that's not what is creating that arc that leads to this devastating ending. And he's got to know that, and he's got to intuit that. And it's like, no, this is here for a purpose, and this is what he would absolutely do, because this is what my film is about. And again, like, you know, on one side of the fence, you're looking at a crazy, egotistical person that doesn't want to listen to anybody else's views, and on the other side, it's like, no, it's, you know, he's got a vision. Don't mess with the vision.
Right. Oh, you know, another thing I forgot to say is Popeye Doyle's life is such, his personal life is in such utter chaos that it's like he seeks order out of his profession, right?
Yeah.
So that's like his whole, it's brilliant.
And that is very similar to the conversation. Like, they're very much, you know, cousin characters, you know. They even lead to a very heartbreaking ending,
right?
Where there's just no way out for them. They are obsessed to a level of, they're on another planet now, and you're not going to communicate with them. You're not going to reach them. It's very, very haunting. Like, I can't, you know,
I would love to know if, when the screenwriter was writing the script, whether Moby Dick came into play at all, only because it really is the literary, like, equivalent of that obsession. And it's such strong storytelling. And I mean, you know, we talk about how do you knock it out of the park? Great cinematography, editing, writing, acting, score, right? Like, it's like, usually when we find these films that are like virtually flawless, it's like, you know, nothing was left to chance. Everything was paid attention to,
right,
so that everything works in concert and nothing is lacking to take away from any of the parts, because they're creating something that we really do feel like a fly on the wall in this film, right? We feel like we're in the chase. I mean, the camera was like mounted on the car, right? Yep. It's like, I mean, it had to be. It's crazy because I'd love to watch the bullet chase scene again, but it felt like you hadn't really seen anything like this. I forgot he's chasing a train, right? I mean, that alone is a set piece that had not been attempted.
Right.
I mean,
that's the thing. Like, it has so many different beats to it, and over a course of so many different locations and so many different. I mean, it's just one big, endless chase. Like, he answered the call from Howard Hawks, and it was just like one big endless chase. And he had to have known. There's a really interesting story where, so Friedkin did go on to Mark Maron's WTF podcast, and if you haven't listened to it, you have. Right. It's a great interview with him.
I like Mark Maron and I like Friedkin.
Yeah, it's perfect. But there's a moment where they're talking about this film, and he's like, you know, I'll say this about the chase, like, I put people's lives in danger. Like, he's like, I was very irresponsible in letting we actually filmed in the streets.
Right.
It was a real car.
Right.
It was going that fast. There were other people and
Right.
pedestrians all, and Mark is like, you know, did you think that at the time that you were doing something this reckless and crazy? And he's like, I didn't care.
I mean, there's a sort of monomania to Friedkin.
Right. He's like, I completely, because he had all these advisors, all these police officer advisors, and he's like, they were saying to him, just do it, and we'll have your back.
Right.
Right. So then he's like, oh, I have
You
this
know, this
power.
I hadn't thought about this, but Ridley Scott. Let's look like the way people talk about the chest burster scene. It's like the way you talk about The Chase. It's literally got like a name, and the way it surprised certain actors in the scene, and then also the way he had medical staff on hand in case anyone fainted from being in these suits that really shouldn't be. Right? It's like there seems like a lot of correlation to the way Scott kind of approached his craft of just like my way, you know.
And then, and you know, and even the story in The Exorcist where he's got Ellen Burstyn tied to a rope, and he pulls her.
You know, I hadn't thought about this, but how is it escaping me? Melancholia, Lars von Trier.
Yep.
Similar kind of like, you know, but it, you know,
Whatever it takes.
Tarkovsky. You look at all these guys, you know, it's like, yeah, they may not be the most compromising individuals, but sometimes, I mean, that's what, look at a conductor, I'm sorry, you know, while a conductor's conducting, are they like, it's like you're doing your thing, man. There's a reason you're up there with the baton, right? Mm-hmm. It's like, you're playing an instrument, I'm up here. So, unless your instrument's out of tune, I don't really want to hear from you, because you didn't write the music, right? So that's why it's sort of a concert between writer and director. Everyone else is playing an instrument. And I guess the cinematographer would be pretty, you know, it's like, yeah, I guess it's a little different, but I'd say those are the three most important.
Yeah.
And the editing obviously plays such a huge part too.
Well, when you're in the shooting, those are the three.
Right, exactly.
Those are the three people, right?
Right.
Those are the three heads that you need to have.
Right.
All on the same page.
Right.
It helps when they're all the same person.
But another 70s film with amazing use of color. I mean, and really it just seemed to come from just good costume design and art direction. I mean, picking certain streets that had really pop to them. I mean, that juxtaposed the blues and the grays, you know?
That's why the look of 70s films, it's something like it's very it's very like I don't know how to nail it down, because I don't know if it's is it the grain of the film,
Right.
Is it the lenses that they're using,
Right.
Is it the fact that they're, you know, they let lights just blow out, and there's like this glow and this ambient light around every frame. You know, there's so many different things where it's like you're trying to nail down this look, and it's so hard because all the colors are very desaturated and subdued.
Well, you look at someone like Kubrick, who's controlling so much of how the image looks.
Right.
Right. So there's just, I think the reason it's such a just kind of untouchable decade, in my opinion, is because there were so many different mavericks that all kind of finding their rhythm at the same time,
Right.
but each with a different set of skills. So it's sort of like a period of jazz where like, it's like, wow, there's just so many like killing it right now, but like they do this really well, and they're all like admirers of each other, right?
Yeah.
It's like,
And they all, you know, they were all given the keys to the car.
Right.
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 And it's just a moment in film history.
It speaks volumes about studios and their willingness to, during the 70s, to you know, kind of trust that these visions would bear fruit. And for the most part, they did.
Right.
And it really kind of changed film history because it opened up the doors to really have studios start to see less and less of the formulaic picture, studio picture.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
And that's the saddest part of the 70s to me, is that it's like, yeah, we had all these mavericks and they were doing all these unique things, but they also had an audience. You know, everyone went to go see these films, and they made money, and that's what kind of gave the studios the encouragement to say, like, yeah, it's making money, so
there was definitely
keep doing it.
There was definitely a tipping point
Yeah.
that was reached
Later.
Yep, where it sort of things changed a little bit, and yeah, it's like sort of the tapestry of American existence kind of changed, of how people consumed things, and I think technology has a lot to do with that. And while technological advancement is to be expected, if it's not tempered with a sort of just cultural literacy and just love of reading and art, then it's like, what good is it if it's replacing those things,
Right.
not just a new means of consuming them, right? Or it's like it really becomes, it's like you just hope that there will continue to be people who want to come see a picture that's going to challenge them, you know?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, as much as I love a good popcorn film.
Right. You can do both.
Exactly.
And you...
I love watching popcorn movies from any era, because sometimes they're just fun. It's like, you know, turn your brain off and just let it wash over you. But I do like to think. You know?
I think this is a good example of a film that does both. Like, there's popcorn stuff in there.
Absolutely.
There's you know, the big chase.
All you're
is
thinking during the
big
chase
set
is,
piece.
holy, fill in the blank.
Right.
Right?
Right.
I mean, like, yeah.
Flew by.
Man, that's it.
So we knew that this was going to be a good one. We knew we were going to delve into this film, and you know, so this episode about French Connection, and then next week we have one of the greatest films of all time.
Yes.
Period. Taxi Driver, Martin Scorsese. We're hopefully going to have a special guest. His name is Alexander Clay Lavin, and he will have some interesting insights, I'm sure. But I really can't wait to sit down and talk about that film with you.
This is a great bridge to that. Mm-hmm. Yep.
All right. So this was The French Connection. Next week we're gonna do Taxi Driver, and we will see you next time.